There's just under 2 months until the Switch 2 officially releases. As even though this is an absolutely massive upgrade when you compare it to the Nintendo Switch, it is also a very expensive one. So the real question is it worth getting a Switch 2 in 2025? As there's a lot of things to consider that weren't actually in the Nintendo Direct at all. So let's start off with maybe the biggest thing to consider, and that's the fact that Nintendo are almost certainly gonna come out with more Nintendo Switch 2 models. Because let's be real, the themed Nintendo Switches did incredibly well. And that's mostly because the designs themselves always looked absolutely incredible. And with Pokemon's 30th anniversary being next year, I feel like we're probably gonna get a themed Switch 2, at least for that. I think the other thing we can almost certainly expect, given the price of a Switch 2, is that they're gonna come out with a cheaper alternative. Probably an equivalent to the Switch Lite. This will be a console that you probably can't dock, but will be able to play in handheld. And I feel like this is the console a lot of people are hoping for. We've also had a ton of people really hope that we get an OLED version of the Switch 2 after we found out that it was going to be an LCD screen. And even though the screen has been said to be absolutely fantastic, I could definitely see an OLED still being an upgrade to that. The other thing to bear in mind is that the Switch, a couple of years after launch, actually got a quiet upgrade, where they managed to increase the battery life of the original model, but sell it for the exact same price. And given the fact that the Switch 2 has an expected battery life starting at 2 hours, I could definitely see a few years down the line them doing the very same thing to the Switch 2. So essentially what I'm trying to say is there may be a benefit to waiting and not buying the very first version of the Nintendo Switch 2. Now the next thing to consider when you're deciding if you want to buy a Switch 2 anytime soon is the games. As for most people, one of the biggest reasons they're going to want to purchase the Switch 2 is to play a game that their Switch won't allow them to play. Now, year one of a brand new console can be a little bit weird, and I don't think Nintendo is going to be any exception. And the Nintendo Direct actually had a big mix of Switch 2 exclusive games, but also a ton of games that are doing a dual release, but they didn't happen to mention that. So just to make things super clear, here are the Switch 2 exclusive games that you won't be able to play on the Nintendo Switch. We have Mario Kart Worlds, which is a launch title. We also have Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour, which is a paid tutorial for the Switch 2, which I don't think many people are going to be buying. Then later on in the year, we have Drag X Drive, Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment, Kirby Air Riders, which I still don't know what this is. Donkey Kong Bonanza will be coming in July 17th. And then in 2026, we have the Dusk Bloods. And as far as we know, both 2 Point Museum and Split Fiction are yet to mention if they're coming to the Switch whatsoever. So at this moment, we assume to be Switch 2 exclusives as well. And if you're someone who hasn't had the ability to play either 2 Point or Split Fiction, you are going to have a fantastic time playing these on the Switch 2. Split Fiction is hands down one of the best co-op games I have ever played. And even though I went into it thinking there was no way they could top It Takes Two, they somehow managed it. Not only is the co-op gameplay so much fun to do with so many different mechanics and made us work together in ways I never expected, the story and the voice acting is also incredible. 2 Point Museum is a game I've spent far too much time on this year. 2 Point Campus was a little bit disappointing for me, but this most definitely blew me away and made me feel the same way I did when I played 2 Point Hospital. This is also a game I think that is best played with a mouse, so I'll be so interested to see if they use the Switch 2's new mouse feature for this to make things a little bit easier. But these are both games that if you haven't played before are incredible and really great to have on the Switch 2. We also have the introduction of Switch 2 Edition games. So these are games which existed on the Nintendo Switch, but then you'll get to pay a little bit extra money to access some more DLC content, which includes The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom on launch day, which they've now stated will be an upgrade price of $9.99. The Kirby and the Forgotten Land DLC will be August 28th, and Super Mario Party Jamboree will be July 24th. One thing that isn't talked about enough when speaking about the upgrades from Switch games to Switch 2 games is the fact that there are a bunch of games that are just getting a free upgrade. You can see the full list on the screen here, but there's a couple I'm really interested in, like The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom. I'm wondering what they're going to do there. I'm very excited to see what Pokemon Scarlet and Violet look like on the Switch 2. Now, I believe that is actually it when it comes to Switch 2 exclusive games, because everything else I'm going to mention is coming to the Switch 2 alongside the Switch. So this includes the likes of Metroid Prime 4, Pokemon Legends Z to A, Story of Seasons Grand Bazaar, Rune Factory Guardians of Azuma, Tamagotchi Plaza, and we also got confirmation that Silk Song will still be releasing on the Switch alongside the Switch 2 as well. Now, this is when I very quickly want to touch about the price. And no, this isn't going to be just about if Mario Kart Worlds is worth the $80. It probably won't be if we're being honest, but if you really want to get it, just buy it as part of the Nintendo Switch 2 bundle. There is no reason to be spending full price on Mario Kart Worlds. But one thing I think we do need to talk about is how expensive it's going to be buying all the new releases on the Switch 2 versus the Nintendo Switch. And two of the games that I think show this the best is Story of Seasons Grand Bazaar and Rune Factory Guardians of Azuma, as both of these have been announced to be coming to both the Switch and Switch 2 and have pre-orders already listed. And unfortunately, the trend of the Switch 2 costing more can be seen here, with both of them being £10 more expensive to buy on the Switch 2 versus the Switch 1. Now, the main issue with games like this is so far as of this moment, they have not given us a dedicated Switch trailer and a dedicated Switch 2 trailer. So there is no way for us to compare the two editions separately to see if the Switch 2 version is even worth more money than the Switch version. Where the pricing will be particularly interesting is going to be the likes of Metroid Prime 4 and also Pokemon Legends Z to A. As neither of these offer extra content and purely offer better visuals, it'll be interesting to see if there is a price difference and how large that is going to be. And one thing we don't know yet is whether we can buy Switch versions of the game on the Switch 2 eShop. Because, for example, if Story of Seasons Grand Bazaar is very much the same on both the Switch 2 and the Switch version, can you just go and buy the Switch version on the eShop so you don't have to spend more money? That's what I'm waiting to find out. But essentially what I'm trying to say is it's not just the upgrade to the Switch 2 that is going to cost you money. All of the games that you buy and play will be more expensive on the Switch 2 versus the Switch, and seeing as the console hasn't come out yet, we don't yet know if the price increase is going to be worth it for games that are released on both the Switch and the Switch 2 at the same time. The other thing we need to discuss when talking about games on the Nintendo Switch 2 is indie titles. Now, I'm going to be real, when the Switch 2 Direct finished, I thought I'd go to Twitter to find a ton of indie devs excited to share that they're going to be coming to the Switch 2. Instead, I was met with absolute silence until the prices of the Switch 2 came out, and then Twitter was absolute chaos. But even so, I haven't seen really any developers outside of the ones from the Direct announcing that they're going to be coming or aiming to come to the Switch 2. So this means one of two things is happening. This either means that the indie game devs themselves have no idea if they're going to make it to the Switch 2, as they quite frankly just haven't got their hands on it yet and haven't even tried to port it over. Or it could optimistically mean that Nintendo have more announcements coming. And this is kind of something I'm hoping for. But if I'm being completely realistic, I don't think we're going to be seeing many Switch 2 specific indie games early on in the console's lifetime. We know we have games like Rune Factory, Story of Seasons. Witchbrook have also announced that they're coming to the Switch 2, although they haven't really said if it's going to be a specific Switch 2 version or if it's just the same as the Switch. But there are a lot of Switch games that are set to release sometime in 2025 who have so far said absolutely nothing about the Switch 2 whatsoever. Tales of the Shire is a big one I've been keeping an eye on, as they're coming out just under 2 months after the Switch 2 launch, but so far haven't even acknowledged the Switch 2 on their socials. I'm also surprised to see Fantasy Life not really mentioning the Switch 2. I know it releases just before the Switch 2 comes out, but it's a game that could definitely benefit from the added power from the Switch 2, given that the Switch trailers look like this. And considering I believe this is made by the same people who are making Professor Layton, which is confirmed to be coming to the Switch 2, I would have thought they'd also be working on Fantasy Life coming to it as well. Even Nintendo haven't properly announced that Tomodachi Life, literally their most liked tweet ever, is coming to the Switch 2 either. So if you're someone who really loves indie games, there may not be all that much of a difference between the Switch 2 and the Switch, at least in the early days. I do think this will change in the future though. Now, we do know that Nintendo typically do a big direct in September, so there's a chance they've left a few massive announcements for that showcase to get people to hopefully want to buy a Switch 2 for Christmas this year. As don't get me wrong, the Nintendo Switch 2 Direct itself was great, but I feel like it was missing maybe just one more big heavy hitter to really solidify this console as needing to be a must-buy year one. And September would be the perfect time for them to announce one more big game coming before Christmas. And this will give the Animal Crossing fans one more chance to be delusional and hope that there's an announcement waiting for us. Because if we're being honest for a second, the Nintendo Direct gave us so many chances to hear something about Animal Crossing, and we just missed it every single time. As not only was Animal Crossing not announced as a brand new game, which is fine, I wasn't exactly expecting it, but then they unveil that GameCube games are making a return, and somehow the original Animal Crossing is not on that. Then they announced that some games are going to be getting brand new DLC when they get upgraded to the Switch 2 versions, and Animal Crossing New Horizons was missing from that list. And then, to finish us off, they did a list of games that are getting a free update when they come to the Switch 2 of just more enhanced graphics and generally looking better. And again, Animal Crossing missed out on being on that list. But you know, my theory is that maybe they haven't given us any of the older Animal Crossing games because a new one is actually coming very soon. Or the Animal Crossing community are going to become the new Silksong community and we're just going to spam Animal Crossing in every Nintendo Direct until it eventually gets announced. It would also be a great chance for Nintendo to tell us what's going to go on next year. As right now, we really only know about Tomodachi Life and the Duskbloods being planned for 2026 releases. But that being said, I'm personally super excited for the Switch 2, even though Nintendo are making it incredibly difficult to be excited about sometimes. I feel like they've given us barely any information. They've been really bad at combating the misinformation that's been going around, simply because they've been almost silent about everything since the Switch 2. But I think for me, the thing that excites me the most maybe isn't what's out right now, but what the future holds. Seeing cozy games like 2 Point Museum get announced to be coming to the Switch 2 makes me think that maybe we'll see other games that skip the Switch come along to the Switch 2 instead. And games I'm hoping for include the likes of Wonder Stop, which is honestly one of the best cozy games I've played this year, as it mixes together elements of owning your very own tea shop, but also the emotions of dealing with burnout. And it's turned out to be one of the most profoundly beautiful games I've played this year. Another game that has skipped the Switch is Urban Jungle. Think unpacking, but with plants instead of belongings, with each of the plants having specific requirements in order to fully thrive in their environments. This again definitely belongs in some handheld capacity, and I can see it happening on the Switch too. Coral Island is another game that I think could fully make it to the Switch 2 given its current specs. This was something that was originally promised for the Switch, but then wound up being unobtainable given the Switch's capabilities, but is much more realistic on the Switch 2, along with the likes of Fields of Mystria, which so far has had no console announcements, but the Switch 2 could be possible. And even the likes of Tiny Glade, a game that would stand no chance looking remotely pretty on the Switch, could stand a solid chance being a fantastic game on the Switch too. And I'm also hopeful that some of my most anticipated games that haven't announced which platforms they're coming to will also manage to make their way to the Switch too. And Tiny Bookshop has to be up there in the games that I need on a Nintendo device. But at the end of the day, that's not a reason to need to buy the Switch 2 right now. So overall, do I think you should buy a Switch 2 in 2025? I think the answer is, it depends. If you know that there's a Switch 2 exclusive game that you really want your hands on, then absolutely go for it. Who am I to stop you from playing a game you cannot wait to play? However, if you're looking at some of these games and you are either undecided or all of the games that you're excited for are currently coming out on the Switch and Switch 2, I think my answer would be to wait. Right now, we really do not know what the difference is going to be between Switch games and Switch 2 games. And considering those games are going to be more expensive as well, only time will tell if these versions are going to be worth it or not. And right now, we just haven't seen enough information. And with Nintendo saying that they're going to continue Switch support for the foreseeable future, it's not exactly like they're going to be pushing you to upgrade immediately either. But I think the biggest thing I want to stress is, as exciting as a new console is, there's also no reason to rush. All of the games that I mentioned, all of the exclusives are still going to be here in a year, 2 years, 3 years, even at the end of the Switch 2's life cycle. And even though pre-orders in the UK are selling out pretty fast, Nintendo have remained fairly confident that they're going to have enough supply for everyone who wants to buy them. So I wouldn't worry too much about needing to jump on the pre-orders immediately or missing your chance to get one at all this year. And for those of you wondering what your next move is console-wise, I think my biggest advice would be to just wait. As I said earlier, I don't think all the Nintendo announcements are done quite yet. So don't be disheartened if there wasn't anything that jumped out at you immediately telling you you needed to buy this console. And honestly, if this is the slowest year we have in the Switch 2's life cycle, I think we're going to be doing pretty great. That being said, I have already pre-ordered the Switch 2. I will be getting it on release day to do an unboxing and tell you all my thoughts and feelings when I get my hands on it. And if you want to see some more information you missed about the Switch 2, click this video here.